I hate introductions, don't you? But it seems like they're always necessary. So here goes. I'm Ashley. I'm a wife, mom, pastor, and missionary's kid, which is double trouble if you didn't know. And if you're in this space, we're here to learn about who God is, who we are in Him, and how to do faith in the real, meaning the real messy. Hey everyone, as you can see, someone's with me today. This is my good friend, Katie. And Katie is really honestly the reason that this is happening. My website and this, because she has so much knowledge and she's been teaching me, and well, I couldn't have done it without you. She's my wizard.
You know what I'm going to say to this.
What?
You're the one that does this. Like,
well,
what?
I needed a teacher and you have taught me well, I hope. So
she's doing great. You're doing great.
And Katie is a natural born storyteller. And so Katie's here to share. Yes.
It's natural.
This is why we met. So you're here today to share some of your story with us. And I want you to teach us. One thing that you say that I love is ask good questions.
Yes.
I'm coming to this with no good questions because I'm counting on you just to be like,
I know.
Here we go.
We laughed about this because we're like, this is going to be easy. It's not a big deal. We clearly don't have a problem talking to each other. No. It's not a big deal. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm one of 10 kids. 8 of us are adopted from all over the world. We're a multicultural family, and it's awesome. It's brought a lot of really cool experiences. And a few of us in our family have physical disabilities. And so, there's a lot of things that come up with that. Good things, hard things, all that. But coming out of having experiences like that, it's taught me to be creative. It's taught me to have a different perspective, which I think is one of the things we're going to dive into. And just like how to be resilient, right? Like how to not give up and just keep on pushing the envelope and seeing, ooh, what else can I do? Because the thing is, I get to take everything that's made for everybody else and make it mine. So I'm always having to be creative and say, okay, well, this thing was meant for people with fingers. I don't have them, so I got to figure out what to do. So it's been a really good experience.
Yeah. You've said something to me that is interesting. Not everybody will just think of.
Yeah.
You talk about your normal.
Yes.
Because what is normal, right?
Yes.
And so things that people might question, you're like, that's
why
normal.
What?
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So questions come up all the time, And oftentimes my most common questions are, how do you do that? I play the piano, and people, when I would play the piano, people would come up to me like, how do you do that? Or I do art, or I do cursive, and how do you do that? And I for the longest time, I didn't know how to answer that question, because I was like, I do it just like you do it. But then I started understanding, okay, the reason they're asking this question is because they're coming from a perspective of, you need fingers, or you need elbows, or you need digits to do these things. And so now it's like, oh, well, I do it because this is my normal, because I haven't experienced anything else besides this, which is actually a huge difference. If you meet people who have a deformity because of an injury, it's a lot different for them. And I always tell people that it's a lot different for them because they're going from one normal to another normal. Where for those of us who are born with things, it's this is our normal, just like you guys having hands and normal joints and things
When you first started coming here, Katie, the boys.
Yes.
As a mom, when my kid is like, where are your hands?
What is going on here?
Can you hold these cards? I was mortified. And you have been so
I could tell.
And patient. Oh, yes. I'm sure you could.
Every mom, I literally had this one time. I was 13 years old. I was at we were getting braces off or something. It was a big day. And I was at whatever it's called. I'm so bad at
the orthodontist.
Yes, thank you. Man, I can never remember all those, dentist, orthodontist, whatever. And there was a mom and a little kid, and the kid was like, why doesn't she have hands? Out loud. And the mom was literally rushing that kid out the door, and I chased after her because I was like, and we'll dive into that, but it's ask good questions. These kids are asking good questions. The adults get to learn. Not everybody who has a physical deformity feels that way. I do, because I love good questions. I understand the benefit of them. And when someone understands when someone asks a good question, it's answered in a good way, then everything's good. It's like kids are the best example of this. So like with your kids, it was so adorable because they had lots of questions and I answered their questions, and then it's like we're best friends, we're buddies, and we don't need to ask anymore. And if we ask, it's out of curiosity, not because it's like I'm wrestling with this. Like it's because I just want to know how you do this thing.
Yes.
And so adults get to learn from that, like that just honesty to be like, okay, this is how it is.
So I'm guessing that it's probably harder to deal with the adults than the kids.
100%.
So for the adults listening, when we have questions, how would you say, what is a good question?
I think the first way to ask a good question is to identify your like lack of understanding first.
That is a great point.
Right. And sometimes we feel like that's like sometimes for those who are the ones asking the question, and I've been in those situations where I'm asking questions of people that I don't understand their situation. And so it's interesting because sometimes we feel that that's not a good way to start it. Like we should know, or we should like have it sorted before we ask the question. But honestly, just opening up and saying, I have no idea what it's like to be you, but I want to understand how to have conversation. And that was really beautiful because you, like, our relationship started out that way, where you were like, I don't want to sound rude, but I want to understand. And that's a really great way to start a question to anyone, because then you're coming open-minded and you're saying, I don't know what it's like to be you. The most annoying questions are the ones coming strictly from someone else's perspective and not willing to look at it from your perspective. And so the really, really great questions are the ones that are like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I just want to support you. I want to understand.
Yeah. Okay. So if you ask a question though, because you mentioned some people are not as open as you are.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I'm like, oh, that would be the worst, to ask a question and then just bomb right in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, so
recovery. I mean, how do you do that?
So there's two things here, because, and I'm not going to pretend like there's plenty of people that will hear this. There's plenty of people that will hear this from time to time, whatever. So if you have a disability, then you get to be patient and gracious. 100%. And it's something that I've learned over time, and having a family where a lot of us are disabled in some, I mean, that's a whole other topic, but it's like the whole idea of disability is frustrating to me because it's like, everybody's got them.
Yes. Can we talk about this for 1 second? Because in the episode before
this will transition well.
Yes. The episode before this, I was talking about how our son has a learning difference. And I talk about, I don't like to use the term disability.
Yeah.
Because that has such a negative connotation. But when you use the word difference, to me, it's positive because it highlights the creator.
Yes.
God has created us differently, and that's not a bad thing. No. It's just different.
Yeah.
And
so here's the cool thing, because when you bring God into the equation, which in our lives is always, you realize that oftentimes our weaknesses, like he's doing amazing things in those. So actually for me, even though like my difference is a physical difference, so it's interesting. Oftentimes people will use like disability, handicap, whatever it is. I don't really care. I'm so used to people saying different things. I don't have any like emotional like attachment to like whatever. But the interesting part is handicap is an interesting thing, because people will talk about like, oh, you're handicapped. And they're talking about my physical handicap. But the cool part is, for me, what I've seen God do is he totally takes the physical and takes care of it. And the thing I get to check my heart on is like mental, emotional, spiritual. Am I okay with myself, right? Am I okay with what God is creating? Am I okay with the body that God gave me? Am I okay with how things are? It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean it's always going to work out the way I want it to. But am I okay with trusting God with that? And everybody's got those things, right?
Yes.
Everybody's got like everybody's got identity issues and confidence issues and all these different things. And so to think that no one is without a difference is a very, well, it's just not
prideful.
Yeah, it's not true.
Well, I mean, because you're right. Because we live in a fallen world, we all are born with some sort of disability, handicap, hindrance.
There's always something mental, physical, and emotional. I mean, there's just so many different things.
Right. And is it hard though? Because it's easy to see your difference. And it's easy for someone like me to be like prideful and think, well, I'm
good.
Normal. What is that? I hate that word.
Normal is kind of a dumb word just because it's like everybody's got a different version of what that is. And so it's like no one even knows what normal is, right? And I bump into that word all the time because people, again, the normal thing. I'm like, this is my normal. It looks different. But the whole idea, or I think the whole idea around even coming back to asking good questions, it's like instead of coming from your own perspective of that person, you come open-minded to learn their perspective.
Right.
Which is so true in like so many different spaces. So if someone has a physical disability, like you asked, okay, is it harder for me because it's physical? Because people see it instantly. People know across the room, she doesn't have hands. It's so fun that I've just spent like 3 days with middle schoolers. They're amazing because they're like, that's different. And then you explain and you're good. And then they're good. Like, it's like, whatever. But the interesting part is in some sense, it's easier because what I tend to not take into account is that a lot of people, the majority of people's disability is not seen. And that means that we can walk over people, we can avoid it, we can not even really identify it. And so when we interact with people, we just assume everybody's good. Like if they've got a smile on their face, they're good. If they're, just carrying on and look quote unquote normal, then they're good. And so I have an advantage in the sense that people see the physical disability and they're like, oh, that's your thing, right? And it opens a discussion for saying, well, actually, it's not. Like, this is the thing that actually is totally fine. And I've learned how to be creative. It's actually like, what's my emotion around that? What's the mental around that? And then that opens a discussion about everybody's got that, right?
Yes. I like how you point out though that because everybody has their thing, but they're not always seen. So I'm just going to use this as an example. The first time you ate dinner with us, I realized I don't know what she might need.
Yes.
And I don't know how to ask without being offensive. So if I remember right, it was something like, Katie, I'm going to assume you can do this unless you tell me otherwise.
Yes.
And that was a good learning, but it kind of forced me to be more others centered in that moment.
Yeah. 100%.
But if I'm struggling with something like depression.
Yes.
And I might have some needs, they might be unseen.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily that others aren't being other-centered as much as it is they just don't know. They can't see.
So this is like a really good, I love this topic. This is a really good topic to go into because I've always been a very happy person. And so the only thing I'd ever dealt with was the physical, which I was like, I have this sorted. Like I was like, I got this. And so a few years ago, I had like a really bad year of depression. And I'm so grateful that I went through that because it taught me how to be empathetic to people who have a disability that's not seen. And even if it's for a season, depression is a perspective. And if you're looking at everything in a negative sense, it's a disability. It's a handicap. Because it's you're not able to see things as they truly are. You're not able to see things in a way that really benefits you and is good for you. So I think when Ashley and I first met each other, we had this real problem that we were like fixing the world. It was so funny. And we were like, people just need to be open and honest and authentic, and they need to stop hiding and pretending everything's fine. And so the thing is, like, if we want people to let us know when they need something, then we have to do the same thing.
Absolutely. It's being able to identify a problem, but then you have to be willing to be part of the solution. So it's almost as if God called us both out on that. All right, you guys think you've got it figured out, hot shots, go.
So it was totally a lesson. And it's constantly a lesson because, it's interesting. People don't necessarily, particularly people who know me well, they don't think about it anymore. They don't think about the physical disability. So if there's any encouragement, if you have someone in your life, if someone's coming into your life, or I talk a lot to parents who are bringing a disabled kid into the world. There's not a lot just because of abortion. It's really sad. But if you've got someone in your life, or you're going to have someone in your life, know that you're not going to think about it eventually. And they're going to figure it out, and you're going to figure it out, and then you're not even going to see it. The problem with that is that we still get to be attentive. And so it's interesting because there's been times where people just assume. So I love that you said, I'm going to assume that you don't need anything unless you let me know. I love that because it like sets the expectation up front. And I think there's not enough of that like in the world in general when interacting with each other, because it's like, now I know, hey, she's not gonna just jump in unless I ask her to. So I get to lead and ask. But oftentimes we just kind of like, there's people in my life that always ask and never assume. There's like, if something looks different, they're like, I need to help you. And I get to lovingly say, hey, like I will let you know. And then there's people in my life that totally don't even think about it. And so I have to be like, okay, I'm going to bring you back. These are things that I need. These are the things that I struggle with. So like in high school, it was tricky because there were things that I really wanted to do with the girls that I couldn't do. And they didn't really think about it because they were thinking, well, Katie's fine. Like Katie can, you know. So there's always going to be challenges. We're never going to get it right.
No.
And so to understand that God's at the center of it, you get like both parties get to be patient and gracious and forgiving. And if there's things you need, like for anyone, if there's something that you need support with, ask. That's vulnerability.
Yes, because it's not everyone else's job to know what you need. It's your job.
No one can read your mind unless they're. Sometimes we can read each other's mind.
It's kind of scary sometimes, but
disturbing.
I said blessing. You went to disturbing. What did you say?
I'm trying to be as tall as Ashley because I'm so short.
I'm trying to slouch a little bit, but then my stomach pooches. So. Oh, okay. So Katie, you have also shared with me so many times, and I want everyone to hear this.
Yeah.
Because it's so beautiful. And I talked about this a little bit when discussing our son.
Yeah.
That sometimes the hard things that God gives us are blessings.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're not hard, but they're gifts, right? Yeah. And I want you to share your gift. What is the gift that God has given you with this difference?
Oh, I mean, there's so many of them, but I really think like the main gift he's given me is perspective. So like people always approach me and assume like certain things about me. So they'll assume like that it bothers me. They'll assume that, you know, like I'm insecure about it, whatever. Normally that goes away very quickly just because I'm comfortable.
Yeah, you are very confident.
So it's like, okay, like whatever. But like perspective is a huge thing for anyone, right? Like once you learn, hey, I choose how I look at things. So once I learned that like I choose how I look at my disability, I choose what is my disability, and I choose what God does with that. Like I choose the perspective. Let me rephrase that. Like God's doing the work. Yeah. He's like 100% in control. But I choose if I'm going to trust him, I'm going to choose what that looks like in my head. Yeah. So it's the same for anybody like going through stuff. Like you just you choose the perspective. And God's doing all the work anyway. Like he's in control. Nothing's gonna change unless it's him. You're so we just gotta like trust.
I love that you bring it back to trust because it's exactly where my brain was going. That there is that choice of am I going to trust him or not, and not just with what is he going to do with it, but in his character.
Yes.
In it.
Yes.
Because there's that verse, you know, that talks about all things work together for good. He doesn't intend evil on you. And it's like, real? Are you sure?
Yeah. Because sometimes we don't see it in completion, right? Sometimes it looks messy. I remember when I was in the middle. So like I had a year of depression, but the kicker was before that, I had a whole year of chronic pain, insomnia. I couldn't sleep. I literally had a playlist that would like make my head like just like so tired that I would fall asleep for another 30 minutes. It was ridiculous. It was so awful. And the cool part is, and I say cool, it was not cool when I was in it. And I remember there were plenty of times, it's probably the time in my life I've journaled the most. And when I go back and look, I'm like, man, I was angry. Like I was frustrated. I was like, God, why? Like I've been doing all of these things for you. Why is this happening? And there were so many things that God was teaching me in that. It was teaching me to slow down and not depend on my skills as my identity. It was showing me that like I'm all his and my attitude is what he cares about, not what I'm doing. Like all of those things. And it was saying, hey, there are other people out there that need your perspective that I want you to like encourage. And it's not all about you, which is like, but God, like that's not nice.
Wait, you mean that's
what?
He says hard things out of his love.
Right. For us dramatic, like happy, like alive kind of gals, sometimes it's like, oh, it's not about me. And the older I get, the more I realize, nope.
And that, I mean, this is definitely something he's used in your life to show you that, which is probably one of the biggest gifts, because it then drives you to him and it forces you to look outward.
It's a daily reminder because there's always like something, people don't think about it because I'm just doing things. I'm busy doing things, but guaranteed when I wake up in the morning, there's going to be at least one joint in my body that hurts. And so it's like, it's a constant daily reminder, and that sounds so sad. That sounds so like, oh, you poor thing. But it's something that God is using constantly to remind me, this isn't forever. And so what you choose to do with this time, like you got to like glorify him. You've got to like do this for him. And it's not always going to be this way. This is like the best way to kind of wrap this up. It's awesome. Cause it's like, here's what I tell people. This is like the silliest thing. I make jokes about myself all the time. I tell people, I'm like, guys, I'm getting the better end of the deal here. I get to experience being like having disabilities and being different when I'm on earth. And then I have a perfect body in heaven waiting for me. The rest of you, like you got like basically kind of the same thing in both worlds.
That's hilarious. Well, Katie, I can't thank you enough for coming here today and for sharing with us.
We did not need a script for this.
No, you didn't. And another thing is, I just want to say this. You have taught me so much, mostly just through your love for Christ and your love for others and your joy that you've experienced. Not that life's always together and that you're always happy, but the joy that you have is just radiant and it overflows. And I'm thankful for your heart and to know you. So thank you for being here. And I've been trying to end every episode with this, and I think it piggybacks well with what you just said, that when we're willing to make our stories about him, when we're willing to admit we need him, that's when our stories become about him.
Guaranteed. It's so true.
So thanks everyone for being here. Drop us a line if you have questions, and don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. Thanks guys. Bye.